what are the things that we can do to mitigate that threat of any kind of artificial intelligence, or maybe there'll be standards that everyone just sort of adopts or for whatever reason. I just want to learn more about how can we mitigate the risk of rogue AIs?
Good question. Craig?
Yeah, there was a 50% chance I was going to get asked over there. I was like, come on, don't be me, don't be me, don't be me. It's super tough, right? I mean, I alluded to this. This is part of the challenge. The challenge is, from a pure regulatory point of view, the challenge of regulation is built around the past, as I said before, right? And what we're seeing right now is the inability for governments and regulators to move quickly enough. Part of that is inextricably linked with just not knowing, right? So I can guarantee you right now, the content that we covered right now today is probably more than 70, if not 80% of information that regulators don't already know, right? So we know more already than 80% of those folks, right? So we're in the 80th percentile. The natural consequence of that is regulation, like compliance, will then move into a space of blocking. And again, you've seen this. You saw this in Italy, right? So we're concerned about this AI thing. This AI thing now leads to Skynet, leads to the end of humanity. And Italy was like, we're going to literally hard switch the thing off. So they didn't have to. They spoke to chat, open AI, and they switched it off, right? So I don't think that's a situation around saying, around the regulatory point of view. The problem is that no matter what answer we have, there's always going to be the rogue folks that are doing things. You can have a look at the CRISPR thing, for argument's sake, right? Already now there's a whole movement of folks that are doing home DNA advancements and things like that at home. And you can do it. It's not difficult to do. The same thing runs true with AI specifically. And the bigger problem is this. The bigger problem is nuclear warheads don't create other nuclear warheads. AIs can. Right? So the problem is I don't really have an answer for you. The biggest answer I can say to you is the hope is there's a regulatory body, an oversight committee, one that stops the mass use of this kind of stuff. And also maybe we need to have a version of a Socratic oath. Now, again, none of those things are actually bulletproof. And I think this is the challenge that we're in right now, is that the use case of technology and AI is such that it's completely decentralized, it's fast, and it's replicable, right? So all of those things together, I think, sit us in a situation where it can be a doom scenario. I'm hoping that the technologists and the folks that are doing this stuff, and when I say technologists, please, I don't mean the folks in San Francisco or the people with access to technology, but the people that are playing with these things are asking the ethical questions. We can see many use cases of when at least the consideration wasn't there. And unfortunately, we moved into a world now where it's no longer about can we do it, but it's a question of should we do it. And so I'm hoping it's a question of education, maybe peer and decentralized. But over and above that, from a regulatory point of view, I don't have a great answer for you. Hopefully, Peter will.
Thank you for popping that one over to me. If we look at modern democracies, there are multiple institutions that create the foundation of it, and you don't want to erode them. We have the legal system, we've got a democratic system, we've got the executive. In the same way, in AI, we will need a multi-pronged approach, and I completely agree with Craig on training and ethical standards, but I believe that there should be an element of transparency in it as well. We want to know, how does this AI work? How does it make decisions? And that should be there. We need to link accountability to it. So if you don't do it based on the ethical foundation that is agreed upon, there should be repercussions. And then, the safety and robustness and public participation, making sure that, nothing is a perfect system, but at least if democracy plays a role, transparency, public participation, and continuous oversight. And I believe that from an international perspective, we should have a body that looks at oversight. Not the only one. So therefore, I don't want to have it a stringent, rigid one, because in a world of complex adaptive systems, if you bring in rigidity, the movement is killed. So you want enabling constraints, and that leads to wisdom. So create constraints that are enabling, but have the constraints, and use that through a multi-factor approach of accountability, transparency, and so forth, and everything else that Craig mentioned.
Thank you. I think that just to sum it up, we've seen a letter that's been put forward. I believe it's in the US, from all the tech leaders around having a bit of a pause on the development until they put some of this alignment in place. So I think there is hope, and that it is on top of the minds of many of the thought leaders or technology leaders in the space. And Thank you for those answers. I'd like to invite to the stage, Hoyen, before I do, are you happy with that answer?
Yeah, of course.
Cool. So I'd like to invite to the stage anyone that has a compelling pain point, concern, for some thoughts that they would like to pose. If you want to jump up, please turn your camera on and pose the question.
Or you can just add in the chat, or raise your hand at the bottom. You can raise your hand, and then if I can, okay, we have some people. Great. I'm gonna bring. Give me a second. All right.
Hello, me again, Lawrence. Just to kind of expand on our conversation earlier, I'd love to hear yours and the rest of the panel's thoughts on how would you go about approaching enterprises and even SMEs on bringing about kind of AI transformation or AI digital transformation. Basically, how can businesses start to embrace this new world of AI and all the solutions it can bring?
Peter?
Okay, so in a complex adaptive space, so when you look at complex adaptive systems, we see that this fitness landscape will change. So that what's fascinating about a fitness landscape is the actions of the players will change the landscape, and the landscape will change the action of the players. This means in order to be successful, forget about big, hairy, audacious goals. Talk about multiple safe to fail initiatives. That's where you start. So start with minor implications that are safe to fail. Get them to try certain things that won't have an impact on their security, on exposure of information. So start with multiple safe to fail initiatives. In the not too distant future, these large language models can be trained on other data. So the large language models capability will be there. Train them on the data for an industry. Let's say, for example, the legal environment or the accounting environment, to make sure that the data is safe, and that will unlock new opportunities, because it's all about the security and confidentiality of your data. So my argument is, in anticipation of some of these standards emerging, start small, multiple safe to fail initiatives, but safe on a variety of levels, from risk to reputation to data security. And that should be your start. And then you can plot a route. Another important element that you can do, get everyone in the same room to talk about what they want to do, gather their stories, cluster their central ideas, and see what emerges. And you'll see that the competences and markets emerge. And that then becomes the underlying competence sets that you can then utilize in that organization to start building it out, because that will be the core to multiple ideas to tap into as a second step. Briefly, thank you, Leon.
Yeah, and I think a great response there, Peter. One of the things I said to the question when it was posed to me earlier was prioritizing that as well. So there will be a lot that will surface from that exercise, but make sure you prioritize it within the respective team or the organization, so you're solving the right problem.
Yeah, if I can just jump in there, Sotros, I think there's a few things over here, right? For me, it's this is obviously a bit of a sales question, right? What I've learned through my role as a consultant, as futurist, scenario plan, etc., the best salespeople don't get you to say yes. They make it impossible for you to say no. A slight difference, but very, very important, right? And part of that psychology behind it is getting them to reframe their own story. So where Peter's coming from is absolutely true. Another methodology is, and I'll borrow straight from almost like the textbook of the futures, the futures thinking landscape. The question is, if you think, irrespective of what you're doing today, think about the world 10 years from now, right? So the client, hey, client, what do you think about the world 10 years from now? Inexplicably, there will be a play here around data, connectivity, and AI. There's not a question. It has to be, because not only has this message been decentralized right now, it is now almost commonplace that data, the internet, and AI is going to play a role, right? So if that's the case 10 years from now, company ABC, without a doubt, the sooner you start that journey, the better. That's the first thing. The second thing, though, is a problem. And the problem is, I've called it in my PhD, I call it the duality of leadership. And the duality of leadership is pretty simply placed as saying most leaders today have the problem around making sure they're profitable today, i.e. you make money today, and then therefore saying also we plan for the future. But the fact of the matter is, practically, you can't plan for the future without being around today. but you have to, right? And even though the research shows us that most leaders think they should spend at least 65% of their time thinking about the future and strategizing for the future, they actually only spend less than 9% of that. So one is about creating a narrative and helping them tell their own narrative of a story, which is, without a doubt, the world is moving to a place of data, internet, AI. The sooner you start that, the better today. Let me help you with that experiment and then implementing some of the stuff that Peter said. And for that, I like to then use something which Llewellyn will know about, obviously. It's the world of experimentation. And that's a world of saying, well, let's have a control, like a scientific experiment. Let's have a control of whatever this element of your company is doing. Let's do an experiment on something else. So maybe it's a data use case, maybe it's an AI use case, and running the productivity and the outputs of it. Because fundamentally still today, you're measured off output. Measure the output of the control, measure the output of the status quo, and show the difference. And hopefully there's a difference towards the AI-driven one, right? So I think it's tactical as well as strategic to engage these folks, but it's mostly around saying, let me help you create the future that you want, not the one that I'm selling you.
Amazing. Thank you all so much. Super insightful.
Thank you for the question. I'd like to invite up anyone else. Hoyen, is there any other hands up there?
Hello, good morning. Good morning here. Like you gentlemen, I've been tracking this for some time. I'm a member of the London Futurists, and there's all kinds of esoteric levels we could go to. I'm going to avoid. So I've tried to think of a question that's really relevant, and you touched on it, Craig, which is where do you see, let's just focus on the technology. What do you think AI will deliver in terms of capabilities in the relative short term? Shall we say 20, 30 or 10 years? Because as everybody realizes, it's only 162 days since ChatGPT was issued, and look at what's happened. So I'd be really interested in your thoughts on where you see this going in the relative short term, maybe from the perspective of business people. Peter.
From a practical level, I think we're going to see grounding, where AI models will have a better idea of reality. So that's a very, very important one. From a practical perspective, we're going to be seeing a huge amount of additional creation in multimedia forms. Right now, we have images and text. I think we're going to see videos soon. We'll be able to create games very quickly utilizing these platforms as we can learn from it. So it's more an extrapolation of what we are currently seeing, but in multiple media forms. I also see, however, very, very big security risks, because these AI models can look for holes in your security cluster. We might have to see a very interesting juxtaposition between that and your zero trust networks. And that can unlock some really unintended consequences from a security and data security perspective. I do see phishing attacks is going to multiply. That's easy to do, because that with phishing attacks. So these are a couple of very elementary elements that we need to consider. The other challenge is more on a geopolitical level. Your Cold War 2.0 scenario, and we're calling it, in the current framework, we're going to call it the Silicon War, where instead of a Cuban Missile Crisis, we've got the Silicon Crisis, where Taiwan is a clear target for that ecosystem. And if that pivots, what happens next? So I believe AI will play a significant role in a new Cold War, and I don't know how that will play out in geopolitics. It might become really hairy in about 10 years from now, where our ability to destroy the economic capability of our opponent will be one of the major tools that AI would be focused on. So there's a couple of scenarios how that might play out, but you asked for a few, there's a few.
Yeah. Give me a few. I mean, I love what Peter's saying. And I think the creation of new stuff, for lack of a better, non-technical phrase, I think becomes really interesting around generative AI, etc. I also like the idea of semi-permeable or semi-open, semi-closed AI, where it's trained. So the AI, the large language model, is trained around the methodology of the bulk, and then gets closed off to my personal use. And I think what you'll start seeing there is you'll almost start seeing like Alexa and Google Home, but closed off from the general use, and it becomes my personal thought guide, growth, whatever the hell I want to call it, right? Because it's trained on my own syntax, my own thinking. So think, for argument's sake, if you're an author, right? How awesome it would be to upload your 3 books. Say, okay, cool, this is my style, this is my thought process, this is what's going on. Here's something in the outside world. Now, using the way that I think about things, you've been trained on me, Craig, or me, Ian, or Peter, or Llewellyn, rewrite your views in terms of how I would write this doing something else, right? So I think there's a really, really interesting use case around permeable AI, for lack of a better word. But I think there's a bigger play over here, and that play is around combinatorials, right? And combinatorials is the use of artificial intelligence as the underlying layer for other stuff. Stupid example, the use of AI in electric cars and efficiency in determining when to use regen braking and when to optimize power output, right? But when you start combining AI with a number of different emerging things, another prime one is being around eugenics and around CRISPR and human augmentation. The ability for AI to sense if it's embedded within a system of a body. What does it then allow you to do? Well, it can now allow you to integrate into an IoT system of things out there or inside of me, if you will. And then it starts making decisions based off stuff that I'm not even conscious of, but it's a pattern based off a system of how my body responds to stuff, right? So I think the combinatorial effect of these things becomes really, really fascinating. And I would say over and above AI, and there's a few other things that are emerging, I still think the realm of biotech, and bio and humans and that kind of stuff is really on the cusp. I think we're very close to seeing cool and crazy and scary stuff that's going to be emerging. And when you overlay these things together, I think we're in another realm of just very crazy human augmented stuff.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there, Craig. I look at some of the startups coming through our ecosystem, the generative AI displacing, photo shoots in studios. We've got AI in WonderTech is one of the companies where it can pick up depression, bipolar, with a 90% accuracy. And then one of the Web3 companies I'm engaging with where generative AI, imagine you are one of the actors in a movie and the movie changes as you take different decisions within a movie or within a game, that the generative AI adjusts and pivots the game itself in real time. So, that's where it's going, and it's quite exciting. And thank you for the question.
But Ian, before you go, I believe you're also a leading expert in this. What have we missed? What are you looking at?
Good question. I think the way governments are reacting is really interesting. We touched on this a minute ago, Peter, and the way Italy has banned ChatGPT, and you were talking about Cold War 3.0 virtually. So China and Russia have shut off from ChatGPT, and invariably they're going to be creating their own AI platforms, and those AI platforms will have differing objectives to our AI platforms, which takes the problems of human nature to a whole new order. So I think that's needs really careful looking at. I'm not overly optimistic about an international agreement. I think there have been times when international agreements have worked, when the world came together in space technology for the International Space Station. That was a great moment. When the world decided not to over capitalize Antarctica and the Arctic, that was a really good pivotal moment. I think we've lost that momentum. I was reading a very interesting article the other day about how space funding, how we could have, the whole lunar landing program had a massive tail on it. And a few years later, we were supposed to be having a moon base. And a few years after that, we were supposed to be going to Mars. And all the funding was cut post Kennedy's assassination. And I am not a conspiracy theorist. I just found this an interesting tack. That one of the reasons Kennedy was assassinated was because the world order, or certain people, didn't want the world coming together. They wanted it fragmented. They preferred it that way. And I suppose that's my concern. If the world were back at the point where we were creating the International Space Station, I think that there would have been real room for international collaboration. But where the world is now, I do worry. I'm in danger of waffling, so I'm going to stop talking. But it was a very, very good question.
Thank you.
Okay, I will stop because otherwise I'll talk all day.
Thank you very much. I see the timer is up, so I think we could carry on with this topic for another 2 hours, in my opinion. And just from my side, Craig, Peter, Hoyen, and the team, Vuyo, thank you, everyone. I think it's really been a phenomenal discussion. We do have the opportunity to network briefly after this as well, if you want to still engage with any of the speakers. Thank you to you, everyone that has jumped on and joined us in this discussion. We will, have future discussions and engage with you. If there's anything that you need answered, if you want to engage with any of the speakers, do scan the QR code that's been provided, and we can organize a one-on-one consult as well. So, Hoyen, over to you.